The man America trusted the most was hiding the darkest secrets of all. Michael Landon wasn't just the beloved father of Little House on the Prairie. He was the moral compass of an entire generation. Families gathered around their televisions, believing every smile, every tear, every lesson he delivered on screen. But behind the wholesome facade was a reality that few ever dared to speak about. Cindy Landon, his widow, lived through it all. She watched the myth grow, the image harden, and the truth fade into whispers. For decades she stayed silent, protecting his legacy, carrying the weight of what she knew. But now, after years of silence, she's finally breaking it, and what she reveals shatters the story millions believed for half a century. What was Michael Landon hiding from his fans? What really unfolded behind the scenes of one of TV's most cherished shows? And why is Cindy speaking now after all these years? When Little House on the Prairie premiered in the early 1970s, it wasn't just another family drama. It was a phenomenon. Set against sweeping landscapes and grounded in moral lessons, the series offered something viewers were desperate for during a time of political cynicism and cultural change, a vision of purity. At the center of it all stood Michael Landon. As Charles Ingalls, he wasn't just a character, he was a symbol. The devoted father, the moral teacher, the man who always found a way to make things right by the final scene. Audiences trusted him, not only as an actor, but as a kind of surrogate patriarch in their own living rooms. What most viewers didn't realize was that Landon was far more than the face of the show. He wrote episodes, produced them, directed them, and shaped every inch of the world audiences adored. His fingerprints were on everything. That control gave him extraordinary creative power, but it also blurred the line between who he was on camera and who he was off it. To the world, he was Pa Ingalls. On set, he was the undisputed authority. Behind the scenes, Landon's intensity could be both inspiring and intimidating. Cast members have described how he demanded absolute commitment from everyone. Scripts were rewritten overnight, scenes reshot multiple times, and tempers occasionally flared when people didn't meet his standards. Some found this exhilarating. Others found it suffocating. The family-friendly image broadcast into millions of homes masked a work environment that ran on Landon's vision and his moods. Cindy Landon entered his life during this height of power. She saw how audiences adored him, how the cast orbited around him, and how his presence filled every corner of the set. From the outside, it looked like a dream. A talented, charismatic man leading one of television's most beloved shows. But up close, she began to understand that the charm and warmth the world saw were only part of who he was. There was another side, driven, controlling, sometimes volatile, that shaped everything about how Little House functioned. This duality became the foundation of the myths and secrets that would follow. The image of Charles Ingalls wasn't simply a role Landon played. It became a kind of armor protecting the real man from scrutiny. Cindy witnessed how power and perception merged into one seamless narrative that the public never questioned. It was this gap, between the glowing image on screen and the complicated man off it, that held some of the darkest truths still to come. As Michael Landon's influence on Little House on the Prairie grew, so did the scrutiny surrounding his personal life. For years he had cultivated the image of a devoted family man, both on and off screen. He was married to Lynn No, raising a large blended family, and often spoke about the importance of family values. To fans, his home life seemed to mirror the very ideals he preached through Charles Ingalls. But behind the polished photographs and magazine interviews, a private storm was gathering that would eventually shake the entire production to its core. During the height of the show's success, Landon began a relationship with a young makeup artist who worked on set, Cindy Landon. She was in her 20s, bright, beautiful, and new to the television world. What began quietly soon became impossible to ignore. Whispers circulated among crew members, subtle glances turned into hushed conversations, and before long, The affair was the worst-kept secret on set. For some, it was shocking. For others, it was a sign of a man who had started to believe he was untouchable. When the affair became public, the fallout was swift and brutal. Landon's marriage to Lynn No ended, and tabloids pounced on the story, contrasting his role as television's perfect father with the very human betrayal playing out in real life. Viewers were stunned, fans who had looked up to him felt betrayed, and cast members were forced to navigate the uncomfortable reality of working with a man whose personal life had suddenly become a national scandal. Inside the Little House family, the affair exposed fractures that had been quietly forming. Karen Grassel, who played Caroline Ingalls, had already been clashing with Landon over pay and creative input. Now, personal tensions added another layer of strain. Melissa Gilbert, who had looked up to Landon as a father figure, was caught between loyalty to him and confusion over the man she thought she knew. Relationships on set shifted. Lines were drawn, even if few dared to speak about it openly. For Cindy, this period was defining. She had fallen in love with a man at the height of his fame, but she also stepped into a maelstrom of judgment, resentment, and whispered disapproval. Her presence symbolized change, not just in Landon's personal life, but in the entire atmosphere around the show. What had once felt like a united cast and crew was now divided by loyalty, discomfort, and lingering questions about the man at the center of it all. The affair marked the first moment when Landon's personal choices collided directly with the wholesome world he had built. It shattered illusions and forced those around him to see that the image America adored was no longer just fiction, it was a shield beginning to crack. By the late 1970s, Michael Landon wasn't just the star of Little House on the Prairie. He had become its entire engine. He wrote, produced, directed, and starred in the series, often juggling multiple roles in a single day. That level of control was rare in television, especially for a weekly network drama. NBC trusted him implicitly, and his word carried more weight than almost anyone else involved in the production. But with that power came clashes that shaped the show's future in ways viewers never saw. Writers often found themselves submitting drafts only to see them completely rewritten overnight. Landon's voice dominated every storyline, and while that consistency gave the series its unmistakable tone, it also left little room for alternative perspectives. Crew members were expected to meet his exacting standards, sometimes under intense pressure. The warm family scenes that looked effortless on screen were often the result of long, grueling days dictated by one man's vision. Among the cast, Karen Grassel emerged as one of the few willing to challenge him. Playing Caroline Ingalls, she was central to the emotional heart of the show, but behind the scenes, she felt undervalued and underpaid compared to her male counterparts. Negotiations for a fairer salary turned tense, and Landon's response was not conciliatory. He held firm, using his influence to shape how those disputes played out in the public eye. According to Grassel's later accounts, these disagreements left lasting scars, changing the dynamic between them for good. NBC executives also had to navigate his authority carefully. Landon's track record of ratings success gave him leverage few stars enjoyed, but his growing independence occasionally put him at odds with the network's broader plans. He wanted creative freedom. They wanted to maintain control. The tug-of-war was mostly invisible to viewers, yet it influenced everything from story arcs to scheduling decisions. Behind the Prairie's simple moral tales were boardroom negotiations and subtle power plays that shaped the narrative just as much as the scripts themselves. Cindy witnessed this evolution up close. By this point, she was no longer the young makeup artist on the sidelines. She had become part of his personal world, seeing firsthand how absolute control changed the atmosphere around him. Colleagues who once saw him as approachable began to tread carefully. Some admired his intensity, others feared crossing him. The authority he projected on set wasn't just about directing scenes, it was about controlling every detail, from the way lines were delivered to how dissent was handled. These behind-the-scenes power struggles revealed a man who had built something extraordinary but was increasingly isolated inside it. The wholesome image that drew millions to their TVs each week was being shaped by a leader whose grip had tightened, and in that tightening, tensions began to quietly fracture the world he had so carefully created. As Michael Landon's grip on Little House on the Prairie tightened, the unity that once defined the show began to fracture. What had started as a close-knit cast, working together to bring a beloved series to life, slowly gave way to quiet divisions, whispered frustrations, and alliances that shifted behind closed doors. These tensions rarely surfaced publicly at the time, but they shaped the atmosphere on set in ways that were impossible to ignore for those living through it. Karen Grassel's deteriorating relationship with Landon created one of the deepest rifts. Once positioned as the show's maternal anchor, she found herself increasingly at odds with his authority. Disagreements over pay had already strained their dynamic, but over time, creative differences widened the gap. She felt sidelined in storylines, sometimes discovering significant changes to her character's scenes only after arriving on set. While she maintained a professional exterior, privately the sense of marginalization grew, and others noticed. Melissa Gilbert's position was more complicated. Having been cast at a young age, she saw Landon as both mentor and father figure. His approval meant everything to her, yet as she matured, she witnessed tensions between him and other adults on set. It left her navigating emotional terrain far beyond her years. Loyalty to Landon sometimes placed her in an unspoken conflict with cast members who were beginning to question his methods and behavior. These interpersonal crosscurrents were never written into the scripts, but they were felt in the silences between takes and the cautious tones in dressing rooms. For some cast members and crew, the affair with Cindy Clerico had already blurred personal and professional lines. A few saw Cindy as an outsider who had suddenly become central to Landon's personal life and, by extension, the production itself. Others simply accepted the new reality. But either way, her presence was a reminder that the man leading the show was living a very different life than the moral patriarch viewers adored each week. These subtle shifts fed into broader unease and reshaped loyalties. Even minor disputes could take on a sharper edge in this environment. Creative disagreements over a line of dialogue or the direction of a scene sometimes carried the weight of much larger, unspoken grievances. Some cast members avoided direct confrontation, choosing instead to stay in their lanes and do their work. Others grew increasingly frustrated, feeling their contributions were diminished as Landon's personal world became inseparable from his professional domain. Cindy, now fully part of his life, observed these undercurrents from a unique vantage point. She wasn't an actress or writer, but she was present, watching how people behaved differently around him. Over time, the set that had once radiated warmth began to reflect the fractures of its central figure. The sense of family that drew audiences in was slowly unraveling behind the scenes, and though few dared to speak openly, everyone could feel the shift. When Michael Landon died in the summer of 1991, the public response was overwhelming. Tributes poured in from fans, networks, and former co-stars. The man who had once symbolized American family values was mourned like a national figure. Yet amid the public grief, Cindy Landon made a deliberate choice. She didn't rush to correct the narratives, didn't defend, and didn't expose. She stayed silent. For decades, her voice remained conspicuously absent from the complicated story that had unfolded behind the camera. That silence was not born of ignorance. Cindy had witnessed everything: the private struggles, the creative battles, the fractures between colleagues, and the personal decisions that sent shockwaves through the cast. She had lived alongside the contradictions, both loving the man and understanding the weight of his choices. But speaking openly during the 1990s, when Landon's image was still almost sacred to viewers, would have meant challenging not only his legacy, but the emotional memories of millions of families who still saw him as Pa Ingalls. For many years, Cindy focused on protecting their children and managing the estate, avoiding the spotlight that followed her everywhere. She attended memorials, gave carefully measured statements, and kept the deeper truths to herself. Within the entertainment industry, people speculated about her perspective, but she offered little. It wasn't bitterness that kept her quiet. It was loyalty, grief, and a recognition that the world wasn't ready to hear what she had experienced. Only in recent years has Cindy begun to speak more candidly. Time has softened some of the reverence that once made honest conversation impossible. Memoirs from former cast members, documentaries, and shifting cultural attitudes towards celebrity have opened the door for more complex truths to emerge. When she has chosen to share her perspective, it has not been to sensationalize, but to contextualize. She speaks of a man who was both remarkable and deeply flawed, whose ambitions created something extraordinary while leaving behind personal scars that others had to carry. Her tone is measured, reflective rather than accusatory. She does not claim to hold every answer, nor does she rewrite the past. Instead, she acknowledges that what viewers saw on screen and what happened behind the scenes were not the same. Her revelations have filled in gaps that had lingered for decades, offering a more complete picture of the man behind the myth. For fans who grew up idolizing Landon, hearing Cindy speak is both unsettling and necessary. It reframes the familiar story without erasing the good that existed within it. In finally choosing to share her truth, Cindy has shifted the narrative. The legend of Michael Landon remains, but now it exists alongside the reality she lived. Her voice, long absent, has become the key to understanding the full weight of the legacy he left behind. Cindy Landon's decision to finally speak has done more than reveal long-buried truths. It has forced a re-evaluation of a cultural icon. For decades, Michael Landon's image stood untouchable, an emblem of family, strength, and moral certainty. But Cindy's perspective has peeled back the layers, showing that behind the carefully constructed persona was a man whose personal choices, professional power, and private struggles shaped the world around him in ways the public never saw. These revelations don't erase the impact of Little House on the Prairie. They deepen it. They remind us that the warmth and values millions found in the series were created by someone far more complex than the character he portrayed. For viewers who grew up watching him, Cindy's honesty reframes cherished memories without destroying them. It invites us to hold both truths at once, the beloved television father and the flawed human being behind the curtain. In the end, her voice has completed a story that was left unfinished for decades. And for those who thought they knew everything about Little House and its star, her revelations have changed that forever. For more emotional stories, check out this video.